Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's devotion. We are in 2 Samuel 6, but in our reading plan, you'll also notice we're in 1 Chronicles 13. Just for clarification, and if you've already read both of these passages today, you know this, but just to be clear, 2 Samuel as well as the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, the same material in those books is covered in the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Sometimes either 2nd Samuel or Kings gives us more detail or additional detail. And other times 1st or 2nd Chronicles gives us more detail or interesting new detail. And so quite often we're going to be looking at those parallel passages because when you put them together, you get the bigger, truer, fuller picture of what was actually happening. And that's the situation today as we're looking at the time when King David decided it was time to move the Ark of the Covenant from where it had been for some time into the new capital of Israel, Jerusalem. And so since we have been reading in 2 Samuel, I put that as the first passage for us to read today. But I'm actually going to focus my comments from 1 Chronicles 13 because there's some additional details there that I think are informative. And I want to share with you a couple of really quick devotional thoughts and then just answer some questions, point out some things that might help you understand what you're reading in these two passages about moving the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. In 1 Chronicles chapter 13, verse 2, David said to all the assembly of Israel, "If it seems good to you, and if it is from the Lord our God, let us send everywhere to our kinsmen who remain in all the land of Israel, and also to the priests and the Levites who are with them in their cities with pasture lands, that they may meet with us." Then verse 3, "And let us bring back the ark of our God, the ark of the covenant, to us, for we did not seek it in the days of the Lord." And then all the assembly said that they would do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. Now, when you read 2 Samuel and here in 1 Chronicles, you'll remember David essentially had his young, valiant soldiers moving the ark from its location to Jerusalem. And they were transporting it on a cart pulled by oxen, I believe it was. And of course, you remember the story of they hit a rough spot near a threshing floor and things shook. And one of the young men beside the ark thought it was going to tumble over, fall out of the ark, out of the cart. And he reaches out and touches it. When he does, God strikes him dead for touching the ark, and David becomes angry and then is afraid, and he leaves the ark somewhere in the home of a certain man and doesn't finish the journey, doesn't finish having it moved into Jerusalem because he's scared of the power of God. He's afraid. Now that's the story that you read in the first part of these two chapters. Now my devotional thought, two of them. One is how David went about this by building consensus. In the verses we read a few moments ago, he got the people together and he said, "Here's what I'd like to do. What do you think about that? If this is what God wants, and if it's what you want, then let's move the ark to our capital, to Jerusalem." And the people in verse 4 said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." It was right in their eyes. So one of the lessons for us, I think, from what David did here is that in life with your family and so on, in life, but also in leadership, whether it's in the church or in business or any other institution, a great principle to use in leading well is to build consensus. Build consensus. And a lot of that is done through having informal conversations before you ever have formal conversations. So that's just one devotional thought, is that building consensus is wise both in life and in leadership. The second devotional thought is the importance of worship, because when David is talking to the people, he acknowledges to them in verse 3 He says, let us bring back the ark of our God to us, move it to Jerusalem, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul. In other words, when Saul was king, there was not a great emphasis on the worship of God, not a great emphasis on the Ark of the Covenant. And David wanted to change all of that. He wanted the people to know that under his leadership, there was going to be a major focus, emphasis, if you will, on worship of their God. And having the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem was very, very important to that. So great lessons, those two lessons, a focus on worship and the value of building consensus as a leader, and so on. Two devotional thoughts. Now, a couple other real quick notes from an interpretation standpoint. You say, when that young man touched the ark to keep it from falling over, why did God kill him? Because in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Numbers, when God gave them the instructions for building the ark and moving the ark, he made it very clear that no one was to ever touch the ark. And that was why. It was dishonoring. That's why he said in here that it was irreverent. God had given strict command, don't touch it. And the other mistake was, in the Old Testament, when God gave those instructions about the ark, they were to carry it. It had two rings on each side, and through those rings, long poles were placed, and priests, and only priests, a certain group of priests, in fact, were allowed to carry the ark, and they were to carry it by inserting those poles, and priests in front and priests behind on both sides placed those poles on their shoulders, and that's how they were to transport the ark. But here, they didn't do that. They put it on a cart, and it was being pulled by donkeys, or oxen rather, and soldiers were doing all of this for the most part. And so they weren't transporting it the way God had instructed, and they touched it. That one man touched it when he wasn't supposed to. And then when it says David was angry, here's the thing: David was not angry at God. David was not angry at God. David was he was either angry at himself because he had made the mistake of having them transport the ark the wrong way, and he knew it. So he was either angry at himself for doing that and putting Uzzah in this particular predicament, or he was mad at the young man, Uzzah, for reaching out and touching it when he wasn't supposed to. And what this did was, David, it says he became afraid. And so he left the ark where it was, or in a house near where all that happened, because David had a fresh appreciation, a fresh reverence, if you will, for the holiness of God. And one last teaching note. In the book of 2 Samuel, the threshing floor where this all happened was called the threshing floor of Nacon. In Chronicles, it's Chidon. So what's going on? Is there a contradiction here? No. Either this was a threshing floor was where they, separated the grain, the wheat from the chaff and the stalk and the husk and all that. And so either this was a threshing floor that belonged to a man who had two names, perhaps the Chronicles name Chidon, which means spear or javelin, was his nickname. Or perhaps it was a location known by two different names because David gave it a new name after all this happened. Or perhaps in one of the books, it's referred to as the threshing floor of this person. And in the other book, the threshing floor of this person at this location. We don't know. So it's not a contradiction. A lot of things have multiple names, or like I say, one could be referring to the owner and the other to the location. We just can't be certain of that. So I wanted to clear up those notes as you read this so you won't be confused. But the devotional thoughts is, hey, we need to always keep a focus on worship in our lives and in our leadership. And we need to always see the value in trying to build consensus in our lives and in our leadership. Those are the thoughts for today. Tomorrow, we're going to see if David learned from the mistakes he made here in his first attempt to move the ark into the city. Finish reading the rest of chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, and then jump over to chapter 15 of 2 Chronicles, where this story continues. So we'll pick that up tomorrow. See you then.